You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com, and Henry the Flowmaster Schwartz from Cboe. The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means it is Thursday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's popping off in the options market? Well, let's find out together, shall we? It is time for the Option Block, everyone's favorite. I know it's my favorite. Hopefully it's your favorite. Bi-weekly source for all things options. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. A couple of things to hit you at really quick at the start of the show here. First off, if you're not listening to the full network, what are you doing? Nearly a dozen other shows coming at you. A lot of great stuff there. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to get access to some exclusive content, exclusive podcast feed, live streams, giveaways, all sorts of awesomeness, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. The only place you can go to get access to all of that fun. And trust me, it's a rockin' good time these days. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. As we go around the horn, see who's joining us on the old Thursday episode. First, let's go out to the hinterlands of Chicago, where we are joined once again by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the program, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here on a Thursday where we have single-digit temperatures in Chicago. What else would I rather be doing?
Nothing. Even under the weather shield, they still get you down to single digits. Maybe they should turn that thing back on. Sounds like it's on the
Yeah.
fritz.
We want to deal with the elements, though. That's just how we roll.
And since we're hanging out in the hinterlands of Chicago, let's now dial a little bit to the south, to the southern hinterlands, to the options mecca known as Frankfort, Illinois, where we are joined once again. You know what, listeners? If you didn't get your fill of Dan's on the network yesterday, we actually had Dan Squared, literally actually Dan Cube, because there were 3 episodes. If that wasn't enough Dan in your life, well then you know what? We got you covered today as we are joined from the options mecca of Frankfurt by our good buddy, the black-hatted one himself, Mr. Dan Passarelli from Market Taker Mentoring, what the cool kids call to Mr. P, welcome back to the option block for, I believe, now your second go around the sun, sir.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mark. Hello, Uncle Mike. Hello, Henry. Glad to be here. It is pretty freaking cold out here, though, like Mike pointed out. I'll tell you that.
So you have recovered from the Dan Squared / Dan Cubed palooza of yesterday, sir.
I'm actually having a bowl of Dan noodles right now.
Perfect. I knew you would carry on the tradition. And then now getting the heck out of the hinterlands of Chicago, where it is threatening 0 degrees, and going to the hallowed halls of Cboe East, where it's a little warmer because they're indoors and because they are preparing for their annual festivities known as the Christmas Party, where we are joined once again in the middle of hanging up the tinsel by the Flowmaster himself, Mr. Henry Schwartz from the aforementioned Cboe East. Mr. Flowmaster, welcome back to the show. How goes the tinsel hanging, sir?
It is a festive day here at Cboe's New York offices. We have our holiday party tonight, which got a lot of people into the office for, some people who work remotely most of the time. But today the office is so full that we there's more people than there are seats. So you have some people camping out in conference rooms. It's kind of fun, though, because you get that, that kind of cross-pollination of ideas and, what are you working on? And can you believe some of this stuff we're seeing in whatever, MicroStrategy, for example? And it's fun. So, we're having a good day. Market's kind of flat-ish, but we're really, I'll tell you, we're barreling into the end of the year, though. Things are going very quickly, so happy to get into things today.
The eggnog brings them all to the office in the old seasonal party. As it is time for us to have a party of our own, listeners, it is time for the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is trading out there. And as the Flowmaster alluded to, we are mostly in the slightly red to mildly flat camp for the most part. The S&P off about 0.15% as we were kicking off the show. Pretty much everything in that same range. NASDAQ off about 0.18%, Dow off about 0.17%. So all in that mildly bearish camp right now. Most of the major indices seem like are rebounding off their lows from the session as well. With the exception of our good pal small caps, they like to do their own thing. And small caps taking the bit in their teeth to the downside today, off about 0.8%, and pretty much hanging out near their lows for the session right now. So again, small caps like to do their own thing, and today that thing is firmly in the red. All this mixed to red action means our old pal VIX Cash looking a little bit firmer today at about 13 3/4 when we kicked off the show. That puts it literally unched from the Monday show. We'll see if we stay there or not as the show progresses. VVIX also looking a little bit frothier as well at about a 98, up about 6 points from where it was this time last week. All right, let's go around the horn the opposite of the way we started. Let's go out to the hallowed halls of Cboe East first. Mr. Flowmaster, an interesting week, kind of a slightly red day kicking off Thursday here. What's catching your eye, sir?
Yeah, it does kind of feel like, we've had kind of a little bit of very moderate pullbacks, and we are looking at, heading into the end of the year with, the market's just on fire. The S&P 500 is up 27% year to date. NASDAQ's up 33% year to date. I think I heard on the news it's the best year since Maybe 2019 was as strong, but incredible year for equities and U.S. equities specifically. So, we have a lot of global conversations, and I was on the show from Amsterdam last week, and the fact that the U.S. market's been so strong this year, and there's just so many headlines about everything from Tesla to MicroStrategy. It's all U.S. focused. So, we're just seeing incredible interest in global investors that really just want to come to the U.S. I mean, we're the kind of we're all the beneficiaries of it. But it's pretty impressive. Volatility's kind of muted. Some of the headlines I've seen are about VIX is at 13.5, and we have some holidays coming up and half day around Christmas. So we know that kind of depresses VIX just kind of mathematically. But there's a lot of discussion about how kind of the fact that at-the-money vol is very, very low. You do have some bids in the tails. So people will look at different kinds of skew indexes, for example. Are kind of saying, look, the vol is very, very low. However, the tail risk is still kind of reflected. And after a year like this, if we had a 5 or 10% pullback, people still, if they are kind of playing it safe and just kind of generally invested in the broad market, they'd still be up double-digit percents year to date. So I read a nice piece by Steve Sosnick from Interactive Brokers, and he kind of called it the honeymoon period, really, because the new administration is not there yet. There's a lot of kind of anticipation of how things are going to go, but there's really kind of the feeling is like, well, nothing's going to happen for the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And that's kind of where we are. But volume's been okay. It hasn't been nearly what it was in November. But I think we topped 53 million contracts yesterday. So we're still easily going to beat 12 billion contracts on the year. So things are good.
Flowmaster, call in for a hot year, 12 billion. Just say that out loud, listeners. What a ridiculous number that is when you actually say it out loud. And if you've been in the option space for any length of time, certainly pre-pandemic, 2019, when we were looking at 3 3/4, maybe a little over 4 billion contracts total for the entire industry for the year. Now we're putting up over 1 billion contracts a month. Many months, just a completely different beast out there pre and post pandemic, in addition to zero DTE and levered ETFs and these derivatives using products out there. It's just a completely different landscape than it was just, let's say, in 2019. So 12 billion would have been insane to say that out loud just a few years ago. Now that's where we find ourselves, listeners. Let's go around the horn. Let's keep going the way we started. Let's go out to the Southern options mecca known as Frankfurt. Mr. Dan, kind of a topsy-turvy, if mostly mildly red week out there. What's been catching your eye, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I thought today was kind of interesting with the PPI coming in, warmer than expected, not super hot or anything, but warmer than expected. And, what was interesting is that there was a lot of there's a good number of pretty big 0-day to expiration trades this morning that were all like bullish delta, all within like the first 45 minutes of the day. And a lot of times when I see that, you get follow through in the same direction, and we're not really getting that today. We're off, a smidge on super low volume. So, it's kind of a funny day. It's kind of like the Bulls and the Bears are battling it out, but they're not really fighting too hard. So kind of strange. I wonder if they say tops take longer to form than bottoms. So I wonder if maybe that's what we're doing here.
Mr. Dan, you heard it here first, or perhaps 50th. Calling for the top out here, Dan. So not feeling this market right now, are you, sir?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell. We're sitting here at a pretty high P ratio and forward P ratio. I didn't take a look at exactly what it is today, but I know it's been high. So I've been sort of observing that a lot this year, but the market doesn't really look at it, or at least they don't care. So I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not necessarily calling for a top, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm kind of calling for a top, but half expecting to be wrong, I guess.
Uh-oh. Uncle Mike, them's fighting words. You are our resident perma bull out here. I know there's some heat behind the scenes between you and Dan as well over some, let's say, a late payment of funds out there. I'll just leave it at that. I have heard talk of pistols at dawn over this, so I know there's some latent animosity there, but now he's turning it up to 11. He's daring to besmirch your beloved market, Uncle Mike. What say you to that?
Hey, I love Dan. I mean, we are pretty high right now, and just in looking at it, with the all-time high of the S&P at 60.99, we're at 60.74 right now, and it's pretty high. not gonna lie. And so, in looking at it, I think the opportunity right now is that no one wants to sell right now because it feels too good to continue to have the market go higher. They've probably been thinking psychologically. You're thinking, oh, if it gets up to 6,000, I'll sell it. Oh, wait, it's up at 620. Well, maybe I'll wait a little bit. And then you start letting that happen. And the way with which to overcome this, if you will, this psychological battle, in my opinion, right now, is hedged equity. And I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks now, and that with the VIX in the 13s, we're not in the 20s anymore. We're 13.5 right now in the VIX. Whatever way with which you want to hedge it, through index puts, through hedging individual holdings, whatever the case may be, I think this is a great time for hedged equity in a lot of ways. Whether you're on the sidelines and you missed out, you want to get in now, hedged equity. You don't have to worry about a ton of down. You don't have to worry about buying the top, or at least you're paying for that peace of mind to where if the market does tank at these levels, then you have that put in place. You can definitely ride the market higher if it goes higher, but you had to pay for that put option. So I think just the ultimate solution to all of these mixed emotions that everyone has is buy some index puts or buy some individual equity puts. Now, in terms of what's happening in the market today or going on this week, I believe we have a Fed announcement next week. So we'll see what they have to say. I'm not sure if that's going to be a major market mover by any means, but we'll see where it's at with that. That's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on. Bonds are down slightly on the day today, not too much of a major movement, with stocks down 0.1% today. So that's by no means anything major in the stock world. The thing that is catching my eye is this Mr. Softy company. It goes down and then, good gosh, it's knocking on the door of all-time highs again. And to me, that's the main thing that's been lighting up my tape, not only today, but lately. Microsoft, Apple's been making a run lately. So there are some stocks out there that are doing some stuff. Apple is up $2 on the day. So we are seeing some big names. It's not just that we have to just, okay, what's NVIDIA doing for the movement? No, NVIDIA's only down like 0.7% on the day. Apple and Microsoft are two of the bigger names. And then just looking at my screen now, we got Big Blue, IBM up 1.5% on the day. So there's a lot of things happening in the old school tech world, if you will. So that's what's lighting up my tape today.
Wow, even the perma bull of Uncle Mike admitting this market is a little high. Could be a little lofty out there. Interesting time. Trying to gin up a little conflict between you two. You're not playing ball at all, Uncle Mike. So I guess I'll have to do all the heavy lifting myself. Let's keep rolling out here into what's lighting up our tapes out here. Is it a banger day out here in the markets, listeners? The answer is kind of depends, once again, where you're looking, where you hang your hat in these markets, listeners, what kind of day you're having. If you're hanging out in VIX, you're actually looking pretty busy today. I mean, our ADB continues to erode because it's that time of year, listeners. ADB is down now to 703,000 contracts. We were threatening 1 million not that long ago, 949, somewhere in that range. Of course, we were threatening that in the dog days of summer as well. So seasonality is not always what you'd expect in the vol market. But right now, VIX doing what it's supposed to do, which is kind of quieting down, but not seemingly today, putting up some numbers today. 750,000 contracts already on the tape in VIX land, 753 to be precise. So already exceeding that ADB by 50,000 contracts. Looks like a lot of that is driven by a couple of big trades, including a pretty sizable vertical which caught my eye for a couple of reasons. First off, its size, and then B, it's just a straight vertical. It doesn't seem like a roll, doesn't seem like any sort of ratio vertical like we've seen a lot of lately, you know, the 20, 40s, 42 halves, etc., 1x4, 1x5. We've seen a lot of that for a long time. Looks like somebody just scooping 100,000 this morning of the Feb 3060 verticals. Looks like paying 52 cents for the privilege, a straight opening on both legs. So kind of interesting. We don't see a lot of that where we see usually the funkier stuff, the ratios, the 1x2s, the 1x3s, the 1x4s. This is just straight Feb upside, listeners. Kind of interesting. So we thought we'd put it out to you folks. A little bit of a flash poll. Are you a fan of that vertical? Yes or no? It's like 80% of you right now. This went live, obviously, a few seconds ago. So this is going to be a flash poll, but we'll leave it open for the rest of the day so you folks on the podcast can vote as well. You liking that spread? 52 cents? Kind of something a little bit different. And then if you want more ratio fun, we got that for you today as well out there in Big Stan. Looks like a Jan 15, 13 half, 1x2 put spread going up as well. Looks like paper selling the 15 puts and buying 2 of the 13 half puts, doing it for 87 and 26 cents respectively. Again, opening on the 13 half, so could be a roll down, in which case maybe a little house money action, or could just be a straight opening on both. We'll have to see more a little bit. There's obviously some OI on those 15 puts in Jan, but that seems to be what's driving a lot of our paper. That's over 250,000 contracts right there. So interesting. Straight up size, upside vertical. And again, something we don't see a lot of, downside ratio put spreads in VIX. We've seen a lot of those in V stocks lately. We've talked about them on vol views, not so much in VIX. So kind of interesting to see maybe the worm turning a little bit out there as well. Is the worm turning in the rest of these names? Well, again, kind of depends where you look. SPY looking kind of light right now, 4.05 million contracts. The ADV exactly 7 million. It's a good day for exact numbers. People are feeling exact today because the 1.6 million, the ADV out there also exactly 3 million contracts, not 3.01, 3 million contracts out there. So we're very exact today, listeners. Small caps looking pretty hot today, 960,000 contracts on the tape in small cap land. Again, not surprising. They were outperforming the other indices to kick off the show. The ADV, 1.4 million, so certainly seems like we're going to hit that today. And the Qs right back to where we expect them to be this time of the show after kind of outperforming for a while now. 2.25 million, that's pretty much exactly what we expect. The ADV, this time not exactly 4 million, 4.06 million to be precise out there in the Qs. Let's go out to the single names, listeners. Is it a banger single name day? The answer is, it's respectable. We've been over 400K a lot lately. We're not quite there today. I think everyone's all caught up in those VIX spreads. But we're 317 to break into the top 10 today. That is, dare I say it, respectable. That gets us to good old Broadcom, aka AVGO, trading 179.88, off about 3 1/3 or nearly 2% today. You know this name. It's been kind of on a wild run this year. It's up 65% year to date. You go back exactly a calendar year, it's up 68%. Good run, giving some of that back today. Broadcom number 10, 317,000 contracts. Number 9, this is the name that used to be the indicator that it was a quiet day. When Alphabet Class A was somewhere in our top 10, you know it was a snooze fest, because Alphabet used to put up, 150, 170,000. Nothing really to write home about. Today, putting up 366,000 contracts. The new AI wars ginning up Alphabet a little bit from a volume perspective. I messed around with Gemini a little bit of late. If you want to listen to our Options Bootcamp show that I did with Dan yesterday, I discuss maybe some of the pros and cons of ChatGPT versus Gemini when it comes to the options market. I'll just leave it there, listeners. You can go check that out for yourselves. But Alphabet Class A today, 194 1/3, off about $1.10 or a little over 0.5%. Good for number 9, 366,000 contracts. Number 8, going out to good old Riot, aka Riot Platforms. 1306, up $1.30 or nearly 11% today. So a nice little run for them. They're still off on the year, even after all this move they've had since September. They were trading 636. They've pretty much more than doubled since then, but they were 1540 a year ago. So they're still off about 2.25 and nearly 15% on the year. Even though they're doing a good job of clawing it all back, listeners, Riot, number 8, 383,000 contracts. Number 7, Uncle Mike's favorite. It's Softy on the rampage, 454.10, up 511 or a little over 1% today. Good for number 7, 426,000 contracts. So looking pretty spicy out there. Let's kick it up to number 6 now. The first of our many A tech. Actually, I take it back. We had AV go already, so we've already hit the A tech names. They're not in a strip today, so it's throwing me off, listeners. Number 6, it's AMD, 431,000 contracts on the tape. AMD, literally a rounding error, 130.14, off a whopping penny today. That's, of course, coming on the heels of some tumult in the chip sector of late. Of course, we've seen China maybe looking askance at NVIDIA and some of those other names, and usually where NVIDIA goes, a lot of the other chip names follow. Lately, it's been to the downside. AMD, though, bucking that trend right now, only off a whopping penny. Number 5, listeners, this one's been an interesting story of late. They kicked their CEO to the curb. Apparently, the market liked that. Number 5, of course, Intel, 463,000 contracts. 2072, up about 60 cents or about 3% today. So maybe they're starting to play catch up. If that's the case, they need it because just year to date, Intel is down over 56%. So obviously, while the rest of the chip sector has been doing gangbusters, Intel, not so much. And obviously, Intel does a lot of things, but still, Intel looking to turn that around. Go figure. They're going to show your CEO the exit when your stock chart is bleeding red while the rest of the market is explosively green. Number 5, Intel, 463,000 contracts out there. Number 4, it is Palantir, 538,000, 73.5, up a buck, I should say, or 1.5%. People have been asking me about this name a lot lately. It's kind of on a lot of people's radar, it seems like. They had a little bit of dust up of late. They broke the 70 handle, got down to 69 and change. It looks like just yesterday. It's like rallying since then. But I think some analysts came out with some bearish predictions for them to sell off something aggressive, like 50% over the course of the next year. So that probably weighing on them a little bit. Also, they've had a nice run, so probably some profit taking as well. Either way, number 4, Palantir, today up a buck and doing 538,000 contracts for the number 4 spot. Number 3, it's the fruit company, keeping our A tech strip alive, 248.70, up 2.25 or nearly 1%. This on the heels of them threatening to become the first $4 trillion with a T. Seems like yesterday, listeners, we were talking about the first $1 trillion company. Now here we are threatening 4T. Fruit company, number 3, 590 out there, listeners. So number 2, number 1, I think you can probably guess what they are. It's Tesla, 1.87 million contracts, 423.75 off a buck for Tesla, or about 0.25%. So not exactly the wildest day on the books out there for Tesla. And the big dog, not looking that big today, but enough for the number 1 spot. It is NVIDIA, 2.02 million contracts on the tape. 138.20 off a $1.11 or nearly 1%. Seems like ever since the end of last week, beginning of this week, ever since China started looking askance, they have been selling off. They are down about almost $6.50 or about 4.5% since all of this is, even though they have rebounded off their lows from Tuesday of 134.63. So if you want to see glass half full, they're not on their lows for the week, but obviously still down on the week. What else is lighting it up out here this week? Are there still some earnings to keep an eye on? The answer is yes. We had Oracle on Monday. We had Uncle Mike's favorite, Ollie's Bargain Outlet Holdings on Tuesday, as well as something you may have heard of called GameStop. Wednesday, Macy's, they're making some headlines with some activist investors and some other interesting things going on out there. Today, we have Broadcom and Costco. So if you're not done with big box wholesale, then Costco after the bell out there today, as well as our old pal Broadcom. And luckily for you, we have some numbers hot off the presses from our friends over there at Orats. Mr. Matt just joining me for the Pro Q&A this week. If you missed that, that was a banger, listeners. Check it out over there on the Pro. Adobe yesterday after the bell, 549.93 is where they were going into their announcement. They were pricing in 7.7%. They delivered 12.2% in the wrong direction, obviously, but still a little bit of earnings outperformance, at least from a vol perspective. Let's see where they're hanging out right now. They are even lower, 476.80. They are still outperforming that straddle almost 2x. Wow. So Adobe, keeping the spirit, the theme of the earnings season alive, listeners, which is buy vol whenever you can, because it's been a banger of outperformance. After the bell today, we have Costco. They're at $9.94.70. They were pricing in $31.09. In the past, they've moved $30.38. So kind of keeping things in line out there. Coming up next week, we have still a few more names you may want to pay attention to. Micron after the bell on the 18th. 102 pretty much even is where it was trading. How's this for juice, listeners? They're pricing in $9.73. In the past, they've moved $6.88. So nearly $3 worth of extra juice out there in Micron. That's looking spicy. We've got everyone's favorite if you want to look to the logistical side. Let's go to FedEx, 19th after the bell. 281 is where they were trading. They were pricing in nearly $23, $22.86. In the past, they've moved $20.44. So quite a bit of extra juice, $2.42 worth. Pretty much 10%. Is that worth it, listeners? Well, given how our season has shaped up, the answer seems to be yes. We are hanging out at 120% right now with most of the big names reporting. That compares to our already lofty long-term average of 114%. So it seemed like at some point we were going to just underperform, but it seemed like every cycle we were waiting for that this season, or this year, I should say. And yet so far, that has not come to pass, listeners. Every cycle has been even more of a banger than the last. Can that possibly continue? I guess we'll find out. You know what else we'll find out? What the Flowmaster has in store for us, listeners, because it is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, it's time to get weird. It is time to get wild. No, it's not time to check in on the personal life of Mr. Dan P. No, it's time to get some unusual activity in our veins. See what the Flowmaster has in store for us. Let's kick things off in HIMX Technologies Inc., ticker symbol HIMX. We have talked about this one before, but it has been a while. I need to go dig in and see what we talked about last. But while I'm doing that, let's go see what the Flowmaster has in store for us today. HIMX right now, $8.69, up nearly $2 or nearly 30%. So yeah, that'll do it to drive some flow out there, listeners. So a banger day today. That's going to obviously change your year when you're up 30% in a day, and that is the case. They are up $2 today, and on the year they're up 3.25 or nearly 60%. So a banger day, which is good because before that they were kind of languishing. They were unched to slightly down on the year. They were about $5.50 a year ago, and they were trading around $5.40 a week or two ago. So they were kind of unched to slightly down on the year, and then bam, off to the races out here in HIMX Technologies. Of course, analysts throwing their hat in the ring, seemingly saying they're going to be a supplier to NVIDIA and Taiwan Semi. So all you have to do is whisper NVIDIA. That's usually enough for a pop. In this case, it's good enough for 30%. Mr. Flowmaster, I'm going to go out on a limb. I haven't looked yet. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, maybe you spotted some call paper out here. What'd you find, sir?
Yeah, so I don't think I've looked at this name. I certainly don't remember trading it, but it did show up on my on a scan that I have, just because the volume was significant. So, and it actually saw the volume before I saw the fact that the stock was up sharply. But average daily volume in this name is only 1,600 contracts a day, and today it's traded 32,000 contracts. So that's 19 times the average daily volume. It's basically 27 times the expected volume by this time of day, and it's almost all calls. In fact, it's 31,000 calls and only 880 puts. And I grabbed the top trades, and there's a couple really interesting ones very early on. Now, there's no headlines that I could find, but stock opened up around $7.50, and there were, within the first 10 minutes of the day, we saw buyers come in for the June 9 calls, the Jan of 2026 $1 call, $10 calls. And and we're talking about like 600 lots, 500 lots, some pretty chunky trades. Option price was between like 50 cents and $1, depending on what the expiration was. So this is a pretty decent amount of premium. But I'll tell you, the stock did kind of rocket higher. And, as you said, it's up almost 30% right now. So those early call buys, are pretty huge. Now, some of the later ones, looks like in the June 11 and 12 strike calls, we continue to see some buyers, but that's with the stock already basically around 840. I'm not sure if there's a catalyst or something, but we have a pretty slick little command and trade alert called look. And if you do a look on this, you can see that the not only is the option volume 28 times normal, but the volatility is up about 24 points, and that put call skew has kinked to an inverted, that where the calls are higher than the puts condition as well. So this seems to be very speculative. I mean, the stock's already got a 30% run. I don't think it's hard to borrow or anything, but it is a semiconductor name, so maybe it's some sort of a little speculation about potential deal. The cost to borrow this thing is around 1%. So it's not easy to borrow, but it doesn't look like a short squeezy type of name currently, but but that's a lot. So on the day, you've got 5,000 of the DC8 calls, a couple thousand of almost every other call that you could kind of want to trade out there. Everything struck between like 8, 9, even up as far as the 12 strike calls. So HIMX, I'm not sure what's up with it. I mean, on the day, you've got almost $2.5 million worth of call premium has traded. So it's significant. I don't know if it's one or more traders, but pretty solid one.
A solid one indeed. Any name that's popping 30% in a day can certainly be described as solid. Mr. Dan, I know you do a little bit of unusual activity scanning, and you look at funky names like this. So what are your thoughts on HIMX looking a lot higher and taking a lot of call paper with it, sir?
Yeah, this is a funny one because the volume in the 8-day options, the December 21s, the call volume is just it's higher than the open interest in a few of the strikes here, which we typically see with like a short squeeze type name. But the short interest is only like 5% on this. It's my Thinkorswim is showing it as hard to borrow, but if the short interest is only 5%, that's kind of strange. And there's not a ton of shares on loan either. It's like 3.74 million shares on loan. So you look at that and I don't know, I just kind of scratch my head a little bit here. I mean, to be fair, the short interest date is only updated every 3 weeks or so. So who knows, maybe it could have increased in the short term, in the last couple of weeks, and maybe that's what we're seeing play out here. But yeah, I don't see anything else that could be indicating it. So it's an interesting one. And Henry pointed out that the skew is kind of inverted. The skew is inverted. And I think that we just see that because we see all this call buying taking place.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it wasn't on a day when it pops 30%.
Yeah.
If ever there was a day to invert some skew, this would be it. So, interesting stuff out here, listeners. I knew this name sounded familiar. I knew we talked about it before, but it has been a while. I did go dig into the archives while the Flowmaster and Dan were talking. We have talked about it a couple of times, but it's been a little bit. First, July 1st, back on the Oddities show, we talked about somebody selling a whole bunch. It's all put paper, by the way, too, which is kind of interesting for a chip name. Back when the stock was $9.62 in July 1st of 2022, someone sold about almost 30,000 of these 6 half puts for a whopping 4 cents. So someone drew a pretty aggressive, well, actually not that aggressive, $3 out of the money, but someone drew a line in the sand. Those only had a few weeks to go as well. So that was kind of a weird one, but a sizable one. I think the first trade that brought HIMX onto our radar. Actually, I take it back. There was one before that. This was from this show back in May of 2021. We talked about somebody buying puts in HIMX. This time on the 9 strike, it was the June 9 puts, paper paying 30 and 35 cents for a total of about 15,000 on the day when the stock was 10.63. So all of our previous dalliances with HIMX have been to the put side, but maybe today rocking 30% to the upside will change that narrative. Either way, let's keep rolling. There were a lot of narratives unfolding this week, listeners, including, if you missed it, Google maybe spooking some folks out there. People are reaching out to me about this too, who don't normally reach out to me about quantum computing, which was interesting. Just saying, hey, what's going on with this Google headline? Of course, talking about their breakthroughs in quantum computing, leading a lot of people on the crypto side to maybe start ringing the alarm bell saying, okay, here it is. Now they are going to finally be able to break the blockchain and break crypto out here. So it kind of caused a little bit of Sturm and Drang out there. Mr. Flowmaster, what caught your eye out here in the wake of all these quantum computing headlines in Google/Alphabet, sir?
Yeah, so I did notice this one on Tuesday because it was very early in the day. What I saw was just kind of a handful of pretty solid call buyers. And, with Alphabet, you have GOOG and GOOGL, and you kind of have to watch them together. I believe the GOOGL doesn't include the same voting rights or something. They trade very, very closely, but there's a little difference to them. And I was just so I saw a few thousand of the calls getting bought that morning, basically as those headlines were coming out. And you're right, there are a lot of people saying, well, wait a second. There's some research or at least some media out there that says, quantum computing means that you could crack the wallets of crypto, and so somebody could get at Satoshi's coins. That's what makes people. That's what the clickbait says. But what I was looking at, the option volume across these two names. Went up from basically like 400,000 contracts a day, which was kind of average, even a little bit below that, to 1.5 million, 2 million. And then today, I think it's still running pretty strong. So people are paying attention to this story. Volume today is a little bit is about 60% above normal. And what I was actually looking at in the data was the biggest open interest changes. So just over basically the last week or so, and you have about 22,000 of the DECE 187 half calls net opened. Okay, and now this is happening, as the stock basically went from 175 to almost 200. Where are we today? 195 still. So big move in the stock, big change in those 187 calls. This looks like, somebody playing, trading around the story for sure, but also the fact that it's in a very, very liquid name like Alphabet, makes it kind of easy for people to get in and get out. And it'll be interesting because this is also a story stock in terms of into the new administration. So lots going on in, technology versus heavy industry and everything else.
Yeah, a lot of headlines, a lot of people getting spooked this week out of this. Mr. Dan, were you paying attention to these headlines? And what do you think about all this wild flow in Alphabet Class A, sir?
Yeah, I mean, when you got a stock that trades that much volume and you're just seeing all this, all these big trades and all this extra volume trading, like, I don't know, man, it's been pretty. I've been an observer, all right? I've been an observer and looking at the news that Henry was talking about. I don't know. I don't have any really super deep insights on this one, Mark, unfortunately. I wish I could say something brilliant I discovered, but I'm just watching it like everybody else. Sorry.
You're too busy breaking the blockchain, aren't you? I get it. I know what you're up to behind the scenes over there. So you're going after Satoshi's wallet. It's Dan. Send all your hate mail to Dan, listeners. We'll get out of the odd block here on this one. I want to pay this off from the Monday show, listeners, because it was kind of weird. It was some very, very specific, very near-dated paper that came across your radar in a name that doesn't seem to warrant it and doesn't usually do it. This is MLCO Resorts and Entertainment Inc., ticker symbol MLCO, MLCO. Again, not a biotech, not some funky name, not a name that had a big earnings announcement coming up this week. It's any real catalyst that we could see. This is the name that, for the most part, it's kind of been down on the year. It's off about $1 on the year, even though it is off its lows of 4 3/4 set back in August. It was trading on the Monday show $7.12, so it had rebounded nicely. Still down on the year. It was about $8 to start the year. But looked like somebody was really feeling their oats out here in MLCO this week. On Monday, they scooped 7,030 of the D7 calls expiring tomorrow on the 13th. So a weekly roll of the dice, listeners. They lifted the offer for 35 cents. The stock again was 7.12, so they were a little bit in the money. There's a little bit of meat on the bone there, which accounts for some of that premium. But we couldn't really find anything that would explain this away. There was no earnings. Didn't seem like there was any big announcement out there on the radar. And so, kind of as you'd expect, the stock has mostly kind of dithered around and actually sold off a bit since Monday. In fact, they didn't quite buy the calls at the high, but pretty darn close. The high for the week is about 7.24. They bought these calls at 7.12. The stock hasn't really looked back. It's $6.90 right now. So, the weekly call, 1 day to go, listeners, they're not looking great. They are all still open. So at this point, it is pretty much a coin flip, but not a good one. Not even a 50-50. It's going to be a much lower probability than that they might make any money on these. But, they have 1 more day to go. So anything could happen, but not looking great here, listeners, on this kind of a little bit head-scratching MLCO call paper out here. Maybe, listeners, you have some reason why somebody would really want to roll the dice for a weekly trade in MLCO resorts, but wasn't exactly lighting up our radar and is not exactly lighting up their bank account right now either. As we keep on rolling, listeners, it's Thursday. We got a little time, so let's get to a little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the Mail Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Mail Block, the portion of the show where you folks take the reins, your questions, your comments, also your insights on our own questions of the week as we turn the spotlight back on you. Just like we did on the Monday show. Uncle Mike, you'll probably recall this. We were talking about the March 6 calls in NVTS. We saw someone coming in and trading almost 10,000 of them, 9,078 for 96 cents. We thought we'd ask you folks at the end of the day, you like that trade? Are you a buyer or a seller at that price, listeners? And pretty overwhelmingly, nearly 77% of you coming in said you'd rather buy those calls. 23.1% said you'd rather sell them. I remember at the time saying, that seems kind of rich to me. And so far, that seems to be the right answer, listeners, because the stock has sold off another 43 cents or 10.5% today, just today. So trading 365. So that 6 strike getting even farther away. Listen, this was a stock that was trading $1.75 not that long ago. So yeah, paying nearly $1 for the March 6s seemed like maybe a bit of a bridge too far, but we weren't certain. Uncle Mike, do you recall this trade we talked about on the Monday show? And what do you think about our audience wanting to buy them, even though the stock right now not exactly backing that up, sir?
Yeah, it's. I think we put this in the category of stocks for crazy people when we were looking at it with the 6 calls. And yeah, I guess I would pick buying if I had to, just because I wouldn't want to be short premium for any reason in any way with this specific under.
Yeah, from a not wanting to get your face ripped off perspective, I certainly can understand that. But an intriguing result nonetheless. Speaking of intriguing results, we asked you last week, hey, South Korea just declared martial law. Is this a tempest in a teapot or a symptom of a more surprise volatility to come this year? We said quite simply VIX right around 13.5 when we posted this last week. I think VIX will close higher or lower at the end of the year. 51.2% of you said higher, above 13.5. 41.5% said lower. About 5% said, who cares, I'm in crypto. And about 2.5% said, who cares, I'm in cash. Speaking of crypto, that brings us to our question of the week this week. While Dan's busy breaking the blockchain, we thought we'd ask you folks, hey, crypto assets have exploded in value this year. By the way, Uncle Mike, cover your ears. You'll probably find this whole question offensive. We said many people are excited about the potential for crypto under the new administration. Quite simply, if you had to pick one, which crypto asset do you feel has the most potential upside in 2025? We gave you 3 choices and the infamous other: Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, and then other. I will reveal your choices in a second, but first, let's go out to Dan, who'll have to pause breaking the blockchain for now. Mr. Dan, gun to your head, sir. You got to pick one crypto asset for next year. You going Bitcoin, you going ETH, you going Solana, or maybe you got an other, you got a weird altcoin in your back pocket you want to share with us, sir.
Oh man, I mean, honestly, I don't have any Bitcoin. I made the decision a while back to put my eggs in the basket of Solana, and it was kind of not necessarily the best decision in hindsight. So, I mean, I don't think that there's any logical reason for my answer, but my answer is Bitcoin. I don't know why, but I think that that's what the market is going to bid up. So I'm going to go Bitcoin.
Dude, that Solana looking a little better now, sir.
Yeah, a little better.
A little better. A little bit of a beast out there in Solana these days. Mr. Flowmaster, maybe you're busy trying to break the blockchain as well, but if you can take a break from that for a second. Gun to your head, you got to pick one crypto asset, sir. Which way you going? Maybe you have a funky altcoin in your back pocket you want to share.
I have a little bit of Pyth Networks, Pyth, because there's actually a project that Cboe's involved in where we provide stock prices to the Pyth Network so people can use that token to create smart contracts, and it's actually kind of interesting. But I'll tell you, I mean, I've been listening to nothing but podcasts on MicroStrategy and all these levered products and this whole kind of exploding ecosystem of Bitcoin related, and maybe ETH will be next. But I would say I really it's just I struggle with it. The same way Dan does. It's kind of like, well, it doesn't have a use, but it certainly has a following. So I think Bitcoin, it's got that first mover advantage, which we see in a lot of things. And I would say that Cboe has these new Bitcoin index options, CBTX and MBTX, which are kind of interesting because it's an index. You can trade options on it. The index is made up of the spot Bitcoin ETFs. So, if Bitcoin's up 2% today, the index moves 2%. Because those spot ETFs move 2%, and it's cash settled, so people don't have to worry about some of the annoyances of physically settled and having enough money to take delivery and everything else. So I actually traded it a little bit yesterday. It's still a very new product, so the quote quality, you got to be pretty careful about what you get in and out of, but it's worth definitely putting on the radar. And I like I said, I said Bitcoin, I think, just still kind of dominates. Whether or not it's the best product is not really the question. It's the fact that you have this giant ecosystem that's developed around it, and a lot of staying power.
Uncle Mike, I will spare you the ignominy of having to vote in our crypto poll, because I know it is very much anathema to all that you stand for. So instead, I will look at now, and it looks like our audience agrees with you guys that it is Bitcoin leading the charge. Over half, 52% of you going the Bitcoin route. Then it's kind of a tie for everything else. ETH and Solana both around 16%. Other also around 16% as well, with some write-ins, including Phantom, which is interesting, or maybe Link. And then, of course, an honorable mention to the Flowmaster's Pyth Network, trading 45 cents right now. So up a little bit, obviously, like everything else is over the last month, but also off its highs. It was trading the $1.10 back in March and has come off quite a bit since then. So interesting. A lot of interesting choices out there. Get over there at Options, make your voice heard, as it is time for us listeners to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, listeners, let's go around the block. We'll start with the Uncleist of Mikes. Mr. Uncle Mike, what's your favorite crypto? No, I'm just kidding. What are you keeping an eye on for the weekend until the Monday show, sir?
I mean, there's really not a lot happening until next week with the Fed meeting, and I don't even know if that's going to be that big of an occurrence, but for the time being, just continuing to watch the 6,100 level in the SPX and seeing if we get any movement in bonds, and seeing if we can, if buyers will come in on this pullback in the precious metals.
All right, and Mr. Dan, same question to you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on through the weekend into next week?
Well, I'm keeping an eye on just VIX levels. it is pretty low, but with a lot of the holidays and such, it should be a little bit depressed. But we could get a little bit of a pop out of it if the market pulls back. Looking at any residual earnings trades, I've been finding Palantir very interesting in their pretty big volume. Their open interest has been it's so much higher than it was even 6 months ago on average. So that one's sort of always on my radar.
All right. And Mr. Flowmaster, the last word is yours. So what are you keeping an eye on until your next appearance next Thursday?
Well, I agree. I kind of expect things to be a little quiet. I mean, it just does feel like the general lean right now is maybe a little bit of risk off, like just kind of heading into year end. Most people are sitting on some gains, and so I kind of think that there's not. I don't think there's a lot of new money getting put into the broad market. There's not a lot. I think we have earnings in a couple of names, Nike and Costco. Coming up. Actually, Costco's today after the close. And I'm going to be watching volatility. It's funny, like today in SPX, even though the market's down a little bit, the volatility structure is literally flat, like hasn't changed not even 0.1 in any term. So that kind of shows you like there's just nothing much happening. So the market's estimate of how volatile things are going to be it's not changing. Today's not really spooking anybody. But just because 1520 handles in the S&P when the index levels around 6,000 or 6,100, it's very quiet. It's just seems like it's gonna be a little bit of a snoozer, probably really into the holidays.
Thankfully, it's never a snoozer on the network, listeners. Unfortunately, that music means we have come to the end of our little bit of a sojourn here on the old option block. If you need more in your lives, don't worry, stay tuned. I'll be back in a little bit talking all things futures options with our friend over there, Mr. Scott from Prosper Trading Academy. So stay tuned for that in a little bit if you want to talk maybe some energy, maybe some equities, maybe a little bit of rates or ags. Who knows what's going to make it onto the show? That's why you have to tune into TWIFO every week. But before we go, let's go around the horn. Mr. Dan, you did an able job here. Dive it into the fray, even though you are conspiring behind the scenes to break the blockchain, sir. Where should folks go if they want more Dan goodness in their lives?
Sure. Head on over to markettaker.com, 2 T's in a row, and glad to chat. You can join our chat room for free at this time. We love all the Options Insider Network listeners.
Except that one guy. You didn't like that one guy. But everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
We don't talk about
jerk.
Him. He was a jerk. MarketTaker.com. Don't forget the second T for Theta, listeners. Check them out over there. And Mr. Uncle Mike, if that one guy wants to go see you, where should he go? What should he do?
See, I love all of our listeners, even that one guy. Check me out on Twitter at Mike Tosaw, Tosaw, or check out my website if you're looking for a financial advisor who does delve in the option product, stcharleswealth.com.
And Mr. Flowmaster, sir, if folks want to kick the tires on anything you have cooking over there in the land of Cboe, where should they go? What should they do?
Just head over to cboe.com/RMA. Which stands for Risk and Market Analytics, and you will be able to see all of the data offerings that we have, the platforms, and you can see what we're up to. And we're always happy to set people up for trials and show them the light.
Show them the light. I like that. New tagline over there. See the light for yourselves, listeners. Cboe.com/RMA. While you're checking out Cboe stuff, check out CBTX. It is interesting. Something a little bit different in the world of Bitcoin and indeed crypto derivatives out there. Still a new product, as Henry mentioned, so still kind of thin, but intriguing nonetheless. CBTX is the ticker if you are intrigued. That's going to do it for us here on the old OB. Back again in a little bit. No rest for the wicked. Talking all things futures options with our friends over there at CME. Back again tomorrow, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. Dr. Vix and a whole cadre of characters in tow to talk some vol tomorrow, listeners. And we're back one final time for the week, exclusively for you cool kids in the secret club, to talk about all this weird paper as lighting up our tape and a whole bunch more on options oddities. You know where to go to get that, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Then we're off again for the weekend so I could rest my voice till we're back again on Monday. Another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.